Three, two, one. What's up? It's your boy Janks in the business. We're going to be fitting some fiberglass 180SX rear quarter panel extensions today. First thing we're going to need is a hammer to smash this fiberglass trash. Just kidding. We'll need some gloves, belt sander, maybe a body saw, drill bits, drill, Phillips head, a 3-inch or 2-inch roll lock disc with a 36 grit or a 60 grit disc, packing tape, DA sander with some 80 grit or 180 grit, fiberglass reinforced body filler, and the tools we need to mix it. Let's go. First, we're going to cover the area that we're fitting these quarter panel extensions with packing tape. The reason that we do that is because body filler or fiberglass filler won't stick to packing tape. So we've got the quarter panel extension side skirt piece. We've covered the quarter panel in packing tape so that we don't scratch the car when we're test fitting, and also so the fiberglass or body filler that we use will not stick to the car when we go to make the gaps fit perfect. So we're about to test fit, see what we need to do to cut, and then we'll start cutting and making it fit. Using the factory mud flap screws, we drilled the holes to attach the side panel. Once this is tight, we'll work on where we have to cut, make relief cuts, and make this panel fit. So since we've slid the holes, we can now put the screws back in and finish our test fit to figure out where we need to cut it. With our piece screwed back to the car, gap's pretty good here. We got a real wide gap here, so it's kind of running downhill. So what we want to do is we're going to cut a pie-shaped piece out of the front so that we can angle the back of this up to match the body line without putting too much pressure on the fiberglass part. And then we'll trim this to fit, and we'll fiberglass this back in, and we should be pretty close. We're going to cut our pie-shaped piece out now. We'll put it back on the car. We'll pull the piece back enough just to trim it till we get it about perfect. And then we're going to use a pinning technique with fiberglass to make sure everything holds together. And we'll wipe our fiberglass filler on there and it'll stay. And then we can work on the rest of the gaps. Putting the screws back in so we can mount it. We've cut our slit in it, so this will flex away. We can pull this back, grind what we need till we get this to fit right. And then we'll go back to the table. We'll drill our other holes in it to do the pinning technique. Make sure you use safety squints. So we've cut the slit, we've opened the slit up a little bit to compensate for our low gap here, so that when we flex this fiberglass piece up, we get the line back where we need it. I'm gonna go over to the table, I'm gonna open this gap up a little bit more so that it doesn't have any tension on it. And we'll put it back on the car and we'll glass it in so that it stays there, and then we'll finish working on our gaps. So I've opened the gap up some more so that we can close it with less tension on it. We're about to clean this up, grind this down so that our fiberglass filler has something to stick to, and we're going to use a pinning method also to kind of lock everything in. What the pinning method is we're going to drill holes through here, so when we wipe our filler on, not only will it fill the gap, it'll go through those holes to bond everything together to give it a stronger bond. All right, so we've got our holes drilled. I'm gonna rough up the outside of this with 36 grit to ensure we get a good bond. I'm also gonna clean up the backside to ensure we get a good bond on the backside. That way it'll be fiberglass through and through. So what we got going on now is we're using the jack to support the back. I've got the front clamped in place with the screws in it. That way we can control the gap at this body line here. We've got our relief cut slit. We're about to mix up some fiberglass filler, and we're going to fill this crack in. We put packing tape behind it to keep it from sticking to the quarter panel. We put packing tape on our wooden mixing stick that we have it clamped with so that the filler won't stick to it. Once we get this filled in, it'll stay there. We can take it off, clean it up, dress it up, and then we can work on this gap and this gap because this part will be done. Make sure we get it mixed thoroughly. So we've got our fiberglass reinforced filler wiped here. We're gonna give that a few minutes, let it set up, start to get hard. We have a window where it's a little bit soft and we'll be able to trim it down and kind of tune it up, make it look right before it's completely hard. All right, our fiberglass filler's tacked up now. We're gonna remove the clamps, remove the screws, remove the jack, get it off. We're gonna clean it up a little bit, and then we'll put it back up to do any other trimming that we gotta do, and we'll keep moving. All right, we're at our point now where the filler is pretty hard, but it's not as hard as it's gonna be. So it's a good time for us to trim this down, knock some of the bulk of this off. Then we can go test fit it, or we can start glassing some of the backside of it, clean it up to make sure that everything's gonna sit flush. And then we'll do some trimming on the back here so that we can get this line to sit flat against the quarter panel. I'm gonna mix up some more of the fiberglass filler. I'm gonna wipe the backside where our seam is and where we drilled our holes just to make sure we got enough strength there. I'm gonna do it sweet and neat so that we don't have to grind it back down. That'll leave us enough bulk there to give us the strength that we're looking for to hold this piece together. We've got our panel mounted back up. We've got a little gap here. We're gonna have to open this hole up a little bit to slide the front in. Our gap's a lot closer, but we've got contact with the quarter panel through here. So we're gonna trim this with the belt sander. This is flexible enough we can pull it back until we get the gap at the top corner here to close. We'll pull the front in and then we'll tighten up our gap here. And then all we have left is to clean this line and make our bracket. So we've trimmed this edge down so that it follows the contour of the body here. We're getting really close. We got to do a little more trimming here, but we're almost flush at the top. You can see how much that closed the gap here. We get the front sucked in a little bit. It's not going to be a whole lot of work after that. So I've got the screws out of the front so that we can push the front to where it fits flush, about where the screws go. The rear we got pushed flush. We've got a real small gap here. I'll show you how we're going to address that and get that fixed up. And then we're just going to clean this line up and we'll be pretty much done. Our next step, we're going to grind down a little bit of this that I wiped here to add some more strength to it. We're going to grind the corner down to make sure all this sits flush. We're going to grind this down and clean this up to make this gap look right. You'll see what I'm talking about when we do it. And we're going to clean up all these edges and rough them up so that our fiberglass filler will stick to them so that we get an almost perfect gap. We're going to take this piece of 80 grit, we're going to rough up this edge and rough up this edge for the next step. So I'm going to mix up some more of the fiberglass body filler. I'm going to smear it on the back side here. I'm going to mount this to the car and I'm going to set it in place. That's going to give this edge some rigidity, take any sort of warpage out. We're going to hold it in place until it cures. And the excess that oozes out, we're going to rub down the edge so that we can make this edge perfect and the gap perfect. We're going to hold our fiberglass body filler away from it as long as we can to get everything set in place to minimize what we smear. Now we're just holding pressure to ensure that this takes the shape of the quarter panel. I've got the screws out. We're at that window where this filler is hard enough that we can work with it, but not so hard we can't sand it. So the next step is we're going to pop it off the tape that's on the quarter panel, and we'll trim it down with a razor blade, and then we'll go to shape it. Now we're going to grab our 80 grit sandpaper, finish shaping all the edges, rounding the edges. We'll hold it up, test fit it again, and then we'll work on the last section back here. And then the rest of it will be ready for the final slick body work, prime, and paint. Putting the screws back in it so we can check the fitment and move on to the rear section. Wipe that. We've wiped our fiberglass filler on that. We've roughed it in. We put it in there before. If you look, our gap is really even. Our gap between the two panels is really even. We smoothed out the back side so that we can put double side tape there to keep it from vibrating and moving. This line is looking really good. Now we're going to trim this back line so that it follows the bumper evenly. We're not going to let it touch the bumper and rub the paint off. And then we'll go on to make an L bracket to bolt this corner up, and we'll be done fitting the piece. All we'll have to do then, finish up the little body work on it, prime it, block sand it, and it'll be ready to paint. If you look at the gap, the fiberglass work is a little inconsistent, so we really just want to clean it up. We're going to mark some of the areas where we see inconsistency so that we can round this out a little more, make the gap look even, and then we'll make our bracket to fit over there. We just marked and trimmed this back line. We got a little bit of trimming to do over here by the exhaust, but we have a nice even gap now. Pretty close. Look at that gap. So we've got it trimmed up. Now all we have to do is make our L bracket, fix the imperfections in the gel coat, be able to prime it and get it painted.